Hello, and welcome to 2025 Levels Plus Whenever, episode 120. Hope that your new year is off to a good start. Today we're going to start a Switch retrospective with the Switch 2 very close on the horizon. I feel it's time to begin looking back at what has become my favorite system of all time, and we're going to start with a look at the entire catalog of Nintendo's own releases for the system. It's pretty lengthy, so we'll just leave this intro short and we're going to jump right in. Friends, can you believe that the Switch was announced pretty close to 8 years ago when this was recorded? And by next year, it's gonna be 8 years since it came out. Since I recorded the majority of what you're about to see, Nintendo announced Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition for next year, which I don't talk about because it wasn't announced when I recorded this. So that's why it's not there, but I do want to acknowledge the fact that this should be in the Xenoblade section, as all of the Xenoblade games are now on the Switch. Back to what I originally recorded. And I have looked up, double-checked, and then triple-checked every single game Nintendo has released on the Switch, excluding DLC, excluding Square Enix stuff, excluding Fitness Boxing, because Imagineer makes those, and a couple other exceptions here and there, to primarily focus on things that Nintendo's had a more direct involvement with than just publishing something. And the results are in front of you. It's a very, very big list of a bunch of franchises, some we haven't seen since consoles past, a few new franchises, a few new gimmicks, a few new wild ideas, and for quite a few franchises, the best overall output they've ever had. Period. So what I want to do to kind of kick off a series of videos, they won't all be consecutive, but I want to talk about the Switch, because the Switch is my favorite console of all time. And I want to talk first about Nintendo's incredible output for these getting close to 8 years, because it's absolutely mind-blowing how much they have put out and how much of it has been considered good to top of class, which I think is quite a remarkable feat in many ways. Mario has certainly been busy. There's over 2 rows of Mario content on the Switch, and this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 wide. So that is 27 titles with a Mario character involved, which is a phenomenal number. And we had pretty much everything that is Mario come back. We had a brand new 3D platformer. We had old 3D platformers with 3D All-Stars and 3D World. We had a new 2D Mario, as well as a throwback, and a real throwback with 35. And then the ability to make our own with Mario Maker 2. Mario vs. Donkey Kong came back from the Game Boy Advance to kind of round out the platformer section. And generally speaking, I think most of these were very well received. I think the biggest controversy in the Mario platformer bunch was 3D All-Stars not having Galaxy 2, not being available anymore, the short-lived Nintendo limited release idea that I'm so glad they seem to have pivoted away from, because that was a bad idea. Because we can no longer play Super Mario Bros. 35. You can no longer buy Super Mario 3D All-Stars on the eShop. You can get it physically. There's quite a few of those floating around still, but it's going up in price. And just to jump ahead slightly, you can't get Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light's brand new localization anymore on the eShop. And it was never released in a proper physical. It has a physical special edition, but it's a code. So there is no cart containing that. And I'm sure there's a couple others in other franchises that I'm less familiar with that had that perk. But generally speaking, those are the ones that I think people really think about. And it's worth talking about, because that is something Nintendo decided to try out. And it got a lot of backlash. And so they seem to have stopped, which is good. That was kind of a mid-Switch life decision that I'm very thankful they pivoted quickly away from. But yeah, like Mario Odyssey, one of the best 3D Marios. Mario Brothers Wonder, one of the best 2D Marios. No real complaints on basically the two major pillars of Mario platforming. And Super Mario Brothers Deluxe, Super Mario 3D World, and Mario vs. Donkey Kong were all fairly well received. Mario Maker 2 had a lot of good things going for it. There was a couple losses that I think people were upset about. Primarily Amiibo support, I think, was the big one of Mario Maker 2. But all in all, I think Mario had a pretty amazing platformer run on the Switch. I wish I could say the same about the sports games, because I can't. I would say that the sports games were the most contentious of Nintendo's output, almost on the whole. Some of their lowest reviewed games of this period of their livelihood have been Mario Tennis Aces, Mario Golf Super Rush. Battle League, Strikers Battle League got off a little bit better, but it too had controversy. So let's talk about these sports games for a minute. Camelot made tennis and golf. They've been making tennis and golf since the N64. And while there was some excellent ideas in those games, they definitely weren't the visual stunners or even the content matching of their predecessors. When I think of Mario Golf, I always think of Mario Golf Toadstool Tour, because I always considered that one of the best looking GameCube games. For Mario, at least. And Mario Golf Super Rush, which is the one I have a personal experience with, is not very attractive. It also shows a lot of compromise. So like one of the things that I really liked about Mario Golf Toadstool Tour was the course variety, especially as you got later into the game and you got into more Mario heavy courses in terms of references and such. There's some of that in Mario Golf Super Rush, but it's like a flat 3D area instead of each hole kind of feeling like its own unique thing. And even though there's more courses in Super Rush, they feel a lot more blasé. I just feel like Camelot didn't put their full 100% into it, and it makes me wonder, well, what are they working on that would prevent them from doing so? Because that's what they do. They're not working on something else that we're aware of. And Mario Tennis Aces kind of had a lot of the same critique. That while they did add some new features, it kind of felt like a step back. And I think Mario Golf Super Rush also felt like a step back. And when you're stepping back from the GameCube one, that's a bit of a problem. And I think Mario Strikers Battle League had a similar situation where it didn't have all of the content up front, so it felt really shallow. And I think Aces, Super Rush, and Strikers Battle League all suffered from that. They came out with shallow content. Mario Golf Super Rush, which is the one I'm familiar with, at least doubled their courses and added some more characters by the time they were done. But ultimately, it just feels like those games were not a priority, they were filler. And it would be nice if we could get on the Switch 2 sequels to those that are better and look better and run better and are more Mario feeling. As odd as that is to say. Mario Party. I have no personal experience, so I'm just going to go off of what people online have said. And I feel like Mario Party took 3 games to actually get to what it should have been in the first place. Super Mario Party 1 was again suffering from the shallow problem, where there was only 4 boards, no online at first, and pared back quite a bit compared to past Mario Parties. So it's definitely the weak link. Even though it had some cool ideas for like partners and such, it wouldn't really be until Jamboree that solidified. Mario Party Superstars was a callback to earlier Mario Parties, screaming for DLC it never received. It needed more boards. Only having 5 was just not quite enough, and we lost a lot of characters between Super Mario Party and Mario Party Superstars as well. Jamboree crosses these 2 ideas of, the new Mario Party aesthetics with the Mario Party Superstars retro callbacks, puts it all together, and seems to be the one, outside of maybe the motion minigames when you play online. But generally speaking, that was a very successful bridging of those earlier Mario Party games, and I think that's the one that's going to be the one people play moving forward. And I hope that there's actual DLC for more retro boards, because the 2 that they picked seem to be really well liked and well received. And it would be nice to see more of the older games get thrown into Jamboree. I think the Mario Party series makes sense for DLC. It's just that Nintendo sees it as an opportunity to, farm out more full-price games instead. But I hope that they do DLC with Jamboree for the fans. Mario Kart, for the very first time in its entire run, has 2 games on the same console. That's never happened before, outside of Virtual Console NSO shenanigans. So we have Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which was a launch title or very close to it. That is the best-selling Switch game to this date, and one of the best-selling games of all time. It's like near 4 million copies at this point. And it is a marvelous port with additional content, and it's a fantastic game. Best Mario Kart that's ever been. Mario Kart Live is an experiment where you have real-life cars, and you drive them through the Switch. And it's a really cool concept because you can make your own courses in your living room within the boundaries of the gear that you get doing it. Unfortunately, I think the novelty of that wore off really fast. Because while it is a Mario Kart game, and it has some of the Mario Kart elements, it doesn't have the chaos that Mario Kart is known for. There doesn't seem to be like split-second, last-minute... there doesn't seem to be those split-second changes in rank like you get in Mario Kart 8 and pretty much all the old ones, because a whole bunch of items just absolutely wreck things. It's primarily like if a cat walks through your course. So, a good experiment, but I think a little bit lacking. Now, one Mario subgenre that has absolutely blown up on the Switch without really any problems is the RPGs. We've had 2 Paper Mario games, a remake of Super Mario RPG, and a brand new Mario & Luigi game that's about to come out. And all of them are at least good to great to best in class. Super Mario RPG, best way to play that game in my opinion. I actually was able to beat it. I got stuck in the Super Nintendo one. I got tired of it, I guess, when I was younger, but I loved the remake. Absolutely splendid update to that game. Paper Mario Origami King, I haven't played it, but I think for a lot of people it was a good follow-up to the last 2, which people had more nitpicks about. It had a little bit more characterization and goofiness, not quite enough. But then Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door got remade, and it's a really good remake. I haven't finished it, but it's a really good remake. And then Brothership looks like it could be a really good Mario & Luigi follow-up. And it's developed by Acquire, who did Octopath Traveler 1 and 2, plus other stuff. So I think it's in the right hands following the bankruptcy of Alpha Dream. So those games are all like firing on a really good cylinder, and I hope that that continues into the Switch too. Now we've got character spin-offs. We've got quite a few of those. Captain Toad Treasure Tracker was ported to the Switch, and I heard that that was a great enhanced port. Luigi's Mansion 3 still hailed one of the best looking games on the Switch. Next Level knows what they're doing. And then Luigi's Mansion 2 HD was a solid enough up-res of the 3DS game. And then we have Princess Peach Showtime, Yoshi's Crafted World, and 2 WarioWare games. And Princess Peach Showtime, done by Goodfeel, maybe didn't set the world on fire, but it was a solid and different take with Peach that I personally liked the little bit I played of it. I need to get back into it. Yoshi's Crafted World was perhaps a misfire. That game kind of stepped away from Woolly World's standards and tried to do some new things, and it didn't really land as well as Woolly World did. Personally, I would love to see them come back to Kirby, but that's another story. And then 2 WarioWare games, one with both of them kind of using the Joy-Cons in creative ways. And both of them were pretty well received, I think. So if we look at Mario as a whole, with these 27 games, some of the best Mario of all time, and some really shaky stuff that Nintendo needs to rethink how they approach the sports games, and I would argue the party games. And no more limited time frame stuff. Just keep it out there. People still want to play Super Mario Bros. 35. Zelda also ate pretty well, with 3 brand new mainline games and 3 spin-offs and 2 remasters. Breath of the Wild, of course, was the bridge between the Wii U and the Switch. I have the Wii U one still. I don't really feel compelled to upgrade other than having it conveniently on a platform that I use a lot more than the Wii U, but Breath of the Wild was basically a generation-defining game. I think that, nothing in Mario, I think, defined a generation the way Breath of the Wild defined a generation. And I don't think there's anything else really up ahead that we can say that about. That's not to say that Nintendo is, just crapping the bed or anything. That's just saying that Breath of the Wild made people rethink how open world could work, and expansiveness and exploration on a level that not many other games had accomplished at that time. And then Tears of the Kingdom, of course, followed up on that with more. And one could argue at times maybe too much more. But I still think Tears of the Kingdom is the better game of the two, because I like having a little bit more of the extra stuff in it. There's parts about Tears of the Kingdom that I like more than Breath of the Wild. So, but I could also say vice versa, because I really think that the Ultra Hand needed to not be so important, or at least a way to make it a little bit easier to do. Anyway, I probably should do a video on Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom as part of this series later on, because clearly I have things to process. Between those two, though, we had a remake and a remaster. We had Link's Awakening and Skyward Sword HD. And Link's Awakening, unfortunately, I don't really care for a ton. I think it's good, but the physics engine that Grezzo applied to the game really annoyed me on some of the puzzles, in contrast to the Game Boy Color version I was familiar with. And the engine was not optimized, which is a problem its spiritual successor, Echoes of Wisdom, carried, but it was less noticeable there. Link's Awakening, unfortunately, is the first game that I feel that pushed the limitations of the Switch to the forefront from Nintendo. And we have a couple others that, unfortunately, that was the case. It just wasn't optimized as well as it could have been. And it was when the console really started to show, like, its limitations. So that is one thing I do wonder about the Switch 2, is if it is truly backwards compatible, as the rumors say, will we be able to get some of these games that had some issues, like Link's Awakening, Echoes of Wisdom, and Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, all in Zelda. There's a few others, but those are the three that I immediately think of. Will they run a little better? Will they be better optimized? So the frame rate's not as stuttery. We're not losing frames. We'll see, I guess. I didn't play Skyward Sword because, if you know me, I don't like the original. But using a controller versus Joy-Cons to actually play it, because that was one of my big beefs with Skyward Sword, is I don't like motion controls. And that was a game all about them. And then we have Echoes of Wisdom, which I recently finished, and I think is a splendid new adventure with Zelda at the front, which I think has needed to happen for over 30 years. So I'm glad it finally happened. And it's a really good game with some residual development cruft that makes it a little less Zelda focused than I'd like. I'll just say. You can read my review if you are curious about those thoughts expanded out a little bit more. We also got Cadence of Hyrule, which in a weird way Nintendo didn't technically publish, but it is a Nintendo franchise, so I'm including it here along with the Hyrule Warriors games. We got a definitive edition of the one for the Wii U, which is one of the most content-dense video games ever made. You could play that one game alone on a desert island and probably be fulfilled for over a decade. If you didn't play it 24/7. There's so much to do in that game. Age of Calamity is an unfortunate title, trying to bridge a little bit of the lore of Breath of the Wild and set up those events, but the way that they framed it as like it's a robot goes back in time, I didn't really care for. And man, that was the one Warriors game that Koei Tecmo dropped the ball on the engine for the Switch. It does not run well. It was too ambitious of a game, I think, for them to pull off on this system. So I hope that it might get better on the Switch too. That's my hope. And I don't have a whole lot more to say about Cadence other than it's cool, but it's a rhythm-based game, and I'm not super into that. And I tried the demo, and it was fine, but I didn't love it, so I didn't feel like playing it more. Out of the major Nintendo franchises, one might think that Donkey Kong has been the most neglected. Because Donkey Kong's had a pretty consistent run, beginning with the NES with just regular Donkey Kong, and then Game Boy had Donkey Kong 94, and then the eventual Donkey Kong Land games. Super Nintendo, of course, had Donkey Kong Country 1 through 3. We had Donkey Kong 64. Mario and Donkey Kong, and the Donkey Kong Country ports on the Game Boy Advance. Donkey Konga and Jungle Beat on the GameCube. And then we had, of course, Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Wii, and eventually 3DS, and then Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze on the Wii U, plus other smaller Donkey Kong games on the DS, and Game Boy Advance, and 3DS that I'm not immediately remembering. So it's been a prominent franchise for Nintendo, with a new title for most of the platforms, until the Switch, and arguably maybe the 3DS. We have two ports, basically. We have Tropical Freeze getting a Wii U upgrade, and then that was in early 2018? And then years have passed, and now we have Donkey Kong Country Returns HD coming from Forever Entertainment in January. And this is going to be a really contentious one to look at, I think, because Forever Entertainment's reputation is not good. And I think a lot of people are a little alarmed by that, with justifiable reason. But to go back to the point, that's what we have for Donkey Kong. We have two remakes, or two ports. One port, one remaster, I guess I can say, because HD looks like it's a 3DS remaster. And Mario and Donkey Kong technically counts in this category as well, which is also a remake. So there's nothing new. There's no new Donkey Kong on the Switch, and I don't think that's going to change between now and the Switch 2. We're running out of time. There's not really much else left. So, kind of an odd situation there. I don't really know what to think about it. A series that has not had that problem is Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem has had a pretty amazing turn on the Switch. Two mainline games with Three Houses and Engage. Three Houses is simply phenomenal. It is the best Fire Emblem game. I wish I could say the same about Engage. Might have the best gameplay of the series, but it makes a lot of stumbles with characterization, story, and it clearly was not that game's emphasis. But I've talked enough about Engage on this channel and on my blog, so I'll just leave it there. We have two Warriors games as well. We have the original Fire Emblem Warriors, which came out pretty early. So early that there's a 3DS version as well. And this game, it was close to being perfect if they had relied less on three games, which is Shadow Dragon, Awakening, and Fates, and opened it up to have more characters across the whole series. Kind of, maybe if they did like Engage, they at least had one from each mainline game and then a couple accessories to go along with them. That would have probably helped it a lot. The biggest issue with the original Fire Emblem Warriors is that the classes are not as diverse, especially coming after Hyrule Warriors, where every character is unique. Marth and Lucina are effectively the same, or like Chrom and Lucina are effectively the same. And you just kind of run into that over and over and over again. So it lacks personality. Fun though. It's a fun game. I don't have any problems really with its gameplay mechanics. And Lin's in it, and Lin's the best Warriors character of all time as far as I'm concerned. But it's not as good as Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition or Fire Emblem Warriors Three Hopes, which is kind of a Gaiden story of what if another character got involved and changed the entire dynamic of the story in Three Hopes, or Three Houses. And it does a pretty good job with that. It's a very fun game to play. The new outfits are great. The characters are still as good as they were in Three Houses. It's just there's some plot lines that suck because it probably got a little bit too ambitious again, much like with Three Houses. But on the whole, it's probably my favorite Warriors game. Even with a couple of its problems. I do like Shez a lot, actually. I'm surprised how much I like Shez. So, we also have Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, as I mentioned earlier, getting its Famicom original localized as a promotion for the 30-year anniversary, which you can no longer buy. But that was really cool. I'm glad that I have it. And Tokyo Mirage Sessions also got ported from the Wii U to the Switch and has more content and is a pretty cool game from what I played of it. I need to finish it. It might be the game that I'm like, oh, this is what I've wanted Persona to be like for a while. We'll see. But yeah, Fire Emblem ate well. Engage made a few stumbles following Three Houses, and the original Fire Emblem Warriors needed more diversity. But outside of that, and so on the whole, Fire Emblem did very well. Outside of Engage's narrative stumbles and original Fire Emblem Warriors' lack of diversity in characters and movesets, I think otherwise, just a fantastic run for that series, and probably the most successful and fan beloved it's ever been. People are like excited about whatever's next for Fire Emblem, and I know I'm personally hoping for the story, character, narrative depth of Three Houses paired with the gameplay improvements in Engage. If we can get those two things to meld, I will be so happy. But Three Houses is going to be a tough game to beat. It's a top 5 game for me, and it's absolutely phenomenal as far as I'm concerned. Metroid also has done pretty well for itself this generation with a brand new game, a top-class remaster, and a long-awaited sequel. That isn't out yet, so I can't talk about it. But Metroid Dread came out of nowhere. Mercury Steam demonstrated they are good stewards of the 2D games with Dread and created a fantastic game. I love Metroid Dread. It's not as good as Super Metroid, which is my favorite game of all time, so that's kind of going to be impossible to top unless you just really, really boil down what makes Super Metroid so good. But this is a very close second. And I love the new suit design for Samus. I love how she emotes in this game. She is the badass I've always wanted her to be in Dread, which is a huge factor for why I love it so much. And it's fun. I mean, I actually went through the effort of getting all the things in it. That's when you know you've done a good job with your Metroid. Prime Remaster is up there as best looking game on the Switch. I would say out of the games I've played, it is the best looking game on the Switch. Hands down, no other game can touch it in terms of the technical aspects. It is the best looking game on the system. And it took what was already a really good game and just brought it up more or less the same with a few minor quality of life improvements, and it's still a fan-freaking-tastic time. Replaying that last year, was wonderful. I'm glad I actually sat down and gave it that revisit, because now I'm really excited about Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, which also looks like it's going to be the best looking game on the system based on the little bit we've seen of it. I can't talk a whole lot about Pokemon in terms of the individual games themselves, but what I will say about Pokemon is that it truly has been Nintendo's roughest franchise on the Switch. Game Freak has not been able to get these games to run well for any of the mainline games or Legends. And honestly, their best work is still Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet run horribly. They are very poorly optimized and really seem to not have resonated with what fans truly want from the series. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, misfire of remakes. People absolutely trashed those. Lots of mobile ports that people I don't think got super into. A sequel to Detective Pikachu that nobody really seemed enthusiastic about. And new Pokemon Snap, which should have been like cash money in the bank, seemed to kind of fall flat for fans of the original Pokemon Snap. Despite everything going in that game's favor, it just didn't seem to hit. And then Pokken Tournament was an early Switch release that was fine. I think that the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon remake was fine. Pokemon Legends Arceus got a lot of people excited, which Scarlet and Violet tried to capitalize on and kind of failed. So I feel like Pokemon needs to stop and think about their strategy for the next gen, because what they had for the Switch isn't working and they're losing people. They almost had me a couple times. Like, I would have probably picked up Legends Arceus or Scarlet and Violet, but they just did things that I got annoyed looking at when I was watching Keaton Nash play them both. So I was like, nope, I'm good to not get into this. So here's hoping that Pokemon Legends Z turns out better, and that whatever happens with the Switch 2 and the franchise is better. Splatoon grew from its Wii U origins into becoming, I think, a true superstar franchise for Nintendo. Two truly evolved from one, added in Off the Hook, who are still my favorite idols, and the best expansion that has been released with Octo expansion, and is generally still probably the best game. Splatoon 3 is more polish, but the maps aren't as good. I think that's been my realization in the last year of thinking about Splatoon 3, is that the maps aren't as good. So I hope with the inevitable Splatoon 4 that we get more callbacks to Splatoon 2 maps, to Splatoon 1 maps, and the maps are better. Because that's, I think, the biggest reason why I've stopped playing it, is that I don't like the maps as much. And they're a lot easier to just get overrun. So, but both those games were huge. They sold extremely well, and I love Splatoon. I love the lore. I love the gameplay. I love a lot of things about it. So I'm looking forward to Splatoon 4. And the Grand Festival was a wonderful way to kind of put an end cap on the series on the Switch. Kirby had a really good run too, in terms of content. A little bit rough perhaps at the start. Star Allies kind of fell flat. It kind of had that lack of content problem that a few other games that I've talked about have had. It added a whole bunch of playable character partners later, But it seemed to be not the Kirby game people wanted at first. And then Kirby and the Forgotten Land showed up, which is the best Kirby game on the system, and is one I need to go buy. Why have I not bought this game? I don't know. I need to go get it. And then we have a nice little remaster of the Wii Kirby's game, Return to Dreamland. And then we had a few spin-off games. We had Kirby Fighters 2 and Super Kirby Clash, which were 3DS games originally, as well as a brand new Kirby's Dream Buffet, which was a cute little Fall Guys-esque racing type of game. Cute, had a little bit of appeal at first, but didn't really catch on the same way as some of the other digital-only titles, I think, that are out there on the Switch. But considering I haven't played any of these beyond demos, I can't really elaborate more, but Kirby and the Forgotten Land has been really well received, and I need to buy and play. Xenoblade Chronicles, another franchise that really came into its own on the Switch. We had 2 brand new games with expansive DLC added to both, as well as a definitive edition of the original game. It almost feels weird that we still haven't gotten X from the Wii U ported, but I don't think that's going to happen on the Switch at this stage, this late in the life. But my personal connections with this franchise is I hate the way Chronicles 2 looks. I don't like the character designs at all. Definitive Edition is truly what it says. It's the best way to play the original game, plus there's a little extra content on it, which I have not played, and I need to get around to doing that. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, my biggest regret on the system so far in terms of not playing it. I played a little bit of it, and then something happened. There was something else that came out that I really wanted to play, and it just got put on the back burner, and it's still there. I'm questioning if I should just even restart, because I don't fully remember where I left off. But I'm hoping that I'll pick it back up pretty quick whenever that happens. Probably next year. But Monolith Soft has been firing well on the Switch. Despite the scope of these games, they look good. They run well. And they're getting better and better with each one. And I'm glad that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has better character design. I still can't believe it's the same designers, too. Oh, Bayonetta. Bayonetta's an interesting one, since it's a co-effort between Sega and Nintendo, but Nintendo's funding their development and publishing the games. So the only one that's really going to escape is the original, because that's the only one Nintendo hasn't had a super direct hand on, outside of the Switch and Wii U versions. But boy, I could think of few games Nintendo's been involved with that have had more controversy and more malice than Bayonetta 3. Announced in 2018 at the Game Awards, silent for nearly 3 more years, and then 2022 finally got a new trailer, got a release date, and right before release, huge problems with its original voice actress coming out as a terrible person, trying to throw the new voice actress, legendary Jennifer Hale, under the bus, and just nasty, just an absolutely nasty thing to have happen in the month or so before release. And then a lot of people really thought that the game's story was disappointing. So yeah, Bayonetta 3 is up there for Nintendo's biggest mishandling? Biggest disappointment, maybe? I don't know. I at least outside of me, I haven't played any of these. I played through the original Bayonetta 1, and that was probably enough for me to kind of get a sense of where these games were going to go. And I was like, I'm good. And unfortunately, the brouhaha about Bayonetta 3 carried over to Cereza and the Lost Demon, which was a spin-off that is very cute and charming looking and does its own thing. It's kind of more Okami-esque, but I don't think it sold well. I don't think it really captured an audience because the audience was still a little mad. And then Hideki Kamiya left. And he was basically the person who was the heart of Bayonetta. So I don't really know what they're going to do with that series on the Switch 2. I really don't. A series that will have some legs, though, remarkably, after all this time, is Pikmin. Silent for a couple years, and then Pikmin 3 Deluxe happened, and then Pikmin 1 and 2 got remastered, and then a brand new game was announced and released with Pikmin 4. And I think all of these were pretty well received, and 4 turned out to be arguably one of the best games in the franchise. I haven't played any of them, because Pikmin's not a series that I like a whole lot, but people that do seem to be really happy with the direction that they're going, and I imagine that it sold well enough to probably promise a 5th game on the Switch 2, if they have more to tell. Alright, well that's a lot of the big franchises that had more than one entry. That was basically where we've been. We'll rapid fire through probably a good chunk of the rest of these. But Smash Ultimate is the best Smash game, without any doubt. It's curious where that series is going to go next on the Switch 2. Is Sakurai going to be involved? Is that what he's been working on for the last couple years? How is it going to change? It's certainly not going to probably be the same game with more characters, as much as people would like that. It's going to probably lose characters and lose licenses and become something a little bit different. We'll have to see, though. I am curious about the future of Smash, but it was a hugely successful game and the best one. Sorry, Melee fans. Animal Crossing New Horizons saved people during the pandemic. I could think of few games that had better release timing on the Switch than Animal Crossing New Horizons. It came out right when everyone was told to go home, and it became a way for people to cope with being locked up all the time. So it was a very important game, and it's a very good game, but this franchise desperately needs to figure out how to make the animal part of this equation more compelling, because your neighbors don't talk enough. They don't have enough dialogue, and I just get bored. I get freaking bored with Animal Crossing despite my best efforts. I wish I didn't. I've owned it twice. I've sold it twice. I wish I loved it the way that some other people do and can just engage with it constantly. I can't. It hits a wall of frustration that I want to get stuff I can't buy because it's not available, because the store didn't get any bigger. And when I tried to talk to my neighbors, they just told me something they've told me 20,000 times already. It needs the personalities of those characters to really flourish in a way that they cannot do. And it needs to open up the shops so you can just get what you want and have your dream home, yard, island just available as soon as you can get it with bells. Like, the general mechanisms that power Animal Crossing are sound. It's the build-up and the long term that it suffers for me. And I'm hoping that gets fixed with the switch to inevitable Animal Crossing. Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp, boy, that had some problems. I'm glad it finally came out, but I think a lot of the enthusiasm for it died with the year and a half plus delay that it got. And it was ready to release. And when it was delayed, and just didn't have anything else happen to it. It would have been nice if Nintendo could have used that dev time or that downtime to add more to it. Like, they could have probably thrown the DS game content on there at that point and just made it Advance Wars 1 plus 2 plus DS Reboot Camp. But they didn't do that. And the game came out with very little fanfare. It's good, from what I understand. I have it, I just haven't played it. And it's just unfortunate what happened to that. Another Code Recollection. I never expected to see the work of Sing be mentioned ever again by Nintendo. And here we are with another Code Recollection doing a wonderful job of bringing those games to modern consoles. I have heard from fans of the originals that they made some pretty big liberties with the plot line, and things, and especially with the Wii game, are different. But, you know, for me, someone who just jumped in with these games, I really liked them, and I really liked the way Ashley's story progressed. There's a couple little things I would change, but on the whole, I loved that experience. And the biggest shock, I think, of the Switch is Famicom Detective Club being resurrected and getting a new game. I don't think anybody had that on their bingo cards. And all three are pretty well received. MEO had one of the best marketing campaigns of this year. Because it had everybody talking. So I haven't got a chance to dive into any of them yet. I'm looking forward to doing that probably next year. Just maybe sitting down and playing all three of them. Because they're not going to take too long. But I think that's really cool that they're back and were done really well. F-Zero also came back. Perhaps not in the way that people would really want it to. People have been clamoring for either a GX remaster or a new game. But F-Zero 99 being a Battle Royale style game worked really well for it. And I think it took off quite a bit in its initial days. And it's still gotten some content up to this day. I don't think it has the same drive that it had when it launched, but it's still being talked about. So kudos to F-Zero 99 for bringing that franchise back, and I hope making Nintendo see that there might be some worth in bringing back the series on a grander scale. We just got the GBA F-Zero games that we haven't had, including one that was never localized on Nintendo Switch Online, so that's kind of a positive sign that they're gauging interest. We'll see where it goes from here. HAL has a couple titles. We'll get to their second one in a little bit. But Box Boy and Box Girl is a sequel to the 3DS DSiWare series, which continued basically the nice, cute little box puzzle aesthetic. I don't think it did anything revolutionary, but I think it was a solid game. And here we are in the Wii Revival section, where Nintendo decided to see if there was that casual audience with how many Switches they've sold. And I don't know how successful any of these efforts were. In contrast to their Wii counterparts, or in a couple cases, 3DS counterparts. But ultimately, I think that the lesson that Nintendo has received, and for the most part at least, is that they're there, but they're not the only thing that they have to cater to. That was one of my beefs with the Wii, is that it really felt like people like me, who have been playing games for a long time, were not the focus. And that the games that I was comfortable playing had controls in them that I didn't care for. So when I think of the Wii, it's not fond. I have a lot of beefs with the Wii. So this entire row of Nintendo Switch Sports, 1-2 Switch, Everybody 1-2 Switch, Endless Ocean Luminous, Brain Training for Nintendo Switch, Big Brain Academy, Brain vs. Brain, Clubhouse Games, 51 Worldwide Classics. That, and I'm going to just toss Ring Fit Adventure and scoot Miitopia down a row, because Miitopia is similar but its own thing. Out of those, only Ring Fit Adventure I think took off, and maybe Switch Sports a little bit. And Ring Fit took off huge, and I would not be surprised if they were thinking of how to capitalize on that component of this effort of casual gaming for the Switch 2, and probably de-emphasizing things like 1-2 Switch and the Brain games. Because I don't think that they sold anywhere near as well as they did on their original versions, except for Ring Fit. Ring Fit did well. Miitopia was a remake of the 3DS game, and it added a lot of customization options and goofiness to it. It's probably, in my book, the best of this entire group of more casual games, because I could see myself at some point devoting time into buying it and creating Miis and getting them all in there. I just haven't had that interest. But it's been fun watching Keita Nash play it with Fire Emblem characters. So I think that was a fairly successful re-release. People still want Tamagotchi Life, though. So I hope that that's something the Switch 2 will see a remaster of, or a remake of. And then we've got some games that are brand new to the Switch. And I don't think many of them took off as well as Nintendo would have liked. Sushi Striker came out on the 3DS and the Switch. It kind of just came and went. ARMS, arguably the most successful of these, is outside of maybe Astral Chain. But I don't think it took off the way Nintendo had intended either. Nobody really talks about ARMS anymore, and Min Min was even relegated to DLC, and compared to just about everybody else that was added to DLC, I think was talked about the least. So I don't know if ARMS will see a resurgence on the Switch 2. Astral Chain was a collaboration with Platinum. I played a little bit of it. It was fine. I just didn't want to be police people. So that was basically the biggest reason I walked away from it. Nintendo dabbled with a couple licensed games. They worked with Team Ninja, of all things, for Ultimate Alliance 3 with Marvel, which was good, but it needed some more thought put into its EXP systems. They also worked with DC on Superhero Girls, which came out a couple years later, and I think was a quieter release on the whole. But interesting decision that Nintendo had there to do comic book stuff, trying that market. I wouldn't mind seeing another Ultimate Alliance game come out with a little bit more traditional RPG elements like the old ones, I think. Because I think that the core of Ultimate Alliance 3 was good. It's just that progression didn't feel very nice. And then we've got a lot of the really small stuff here. So, outside of Tetris 99, of course, Tetris 99 continues to be a very successful Nintendo Switch Online perk, made by Eureka, who knows their way around Tetris. So that's been huge for them. The rest of these, moving on. or a bit smaller. Part-Time UFO was a Switch/mobile game by HAL. The mobile one was just recently removed from storefronts. But this is a cute little game. Snipper Clips and Snipper Clips Plus, a slightly expanded version. That was a very positively received smaller title from Nintendo. And those developers have gone on to do Crow Country or whatever that game is. So that's kind of neat how they've really gone from like this super cutesy game to a PS1 horror game. I know nothing about Flip Wars other than I guess it's a puzzle game, and I've never heard anyone talk about it. Good job in the stretchers were kind of interesting little initiatives with some smaller indie teams to publish their games, digitally only. And both of them came out, and I think that they had a little bit of buzz, but they kind of went away. Game Builder Garage was kind of trying to pick up from the Mario Maker 2 success, but I don't think it really landed. Nintendo World Championships NES Edition, there's still people playing that are into speedrunning. So I think if their goal was to go after speedrunners, they got it. But what I wanted was NES Remix 3 or Super Nintendo Remix or something. And I think a lot of people wanted that too. So I think that it found its niche, and that niche is still engaging with it, but it didn't probably get the numbers that Nintendo really wanted. So we'll see if a Super Nintendo edition comes out or not. Of course, Labo, the biggest experiment perhaps with the Switch to try to capture an interesting new audience by building cardboard and having it work with the Joy-Cons. This initiative kind of died out after the first year, 2 years, I would say. I think the VR set came out in like late 2018 or mid 2018, and then nothing else really used it after that. And they've just quietly gone away and disappeared. In all of those games, you kind of need the cardboard to do the things with them, so kind of lost media in a sense. The last game that we received in North America is Jump Rope Challenge, which is just a cutesy little simple game that somebody in Nintendo put together and they decided to release for like really cheap. It's charming, but I don't know how much engagement it really got. And then we've got this guy, this one right here, Buddy Mission Bond, which is a licensed game, only released in Japan. I don't know a whole lot about it, honestly, other than it's based on some sort of manga that I know nothing about. I forgot who even developed it for them. Let me look that up real quick. That would be a company called Ruby Party, who I am not familiar with. And that kind of came and went too. I don't really know how well that did for Nintendo Japan, but they didn't bother localizing it in any fashion. Unlike everything else on this list, which they did. Kind of wild to think that there's only one Japanese exclusive game on this system. And you could play it, you could import it and play it in Japanese. That's the really cool thing about the Switch is Nintendo made a wise decision to get rid of their region locking policy. The unfortunate thing is that as the system has moved on in years, companies have gotten a little bit wise to that and are releasing specific region versions. So my Japanese version of Bakeru doesn't translate to the English edition because Spike Chunsoft decided not to do that, and by adding a few features in basically made the Japanese version irrelevant. So that's everything that Switch has gotten from Nintendo by them or second parties, and in a couple of cases third parties or indie partners. And it's really quite astounding. I mean, I talked about some of the low points, but on the grand scheme of things, Nintendo was cooking this generation. And there might be one or two things that come out that haven't been announced yet between now and the Switch 2 or whatever it's going to be. But I feel like this is a pretty nice little retrospective of how well Nintendo has done. To wrap up, I think what I'm going to do is we'll talk about the games that I think have really done well, and we'll cut this list down to like a top 10 Switch games by Nintendo, by me. Shouldn't take too long because I kind of have that already organized on other lists, but I think it'd be a nice way to just kind of say, these are the games that really, really cement the Switch for me as Nintendo's best system, by Nintendo. Alright, so just real quick, me personally, these are 14, so I have to go with 14 games that I feel are Nintendo's best work on the Switch, which isn't too surprising. Most of these are on my top 110. In fact, I think all of them are. I think Mario Kart 8 is the only one that's not, but it deserved to stay up here because it's almost sold 4 million copies. It's a really good game. But these are the ones that, for me, stand out really tall in a very crowded market on the Switch, because there's thousands of games on the Switch, but Nintendo has delivered some of the best experiences for sure. I will see you in the next episode. Have a happy new year, and may things go well for you for the first few weeks of this going to be interesting year. Take care.